we take a moment and thank our music team for leading us this morning? They did such a good job. Ruth chapter 3, we are almost done. We have this week, and then, Lord willing, one more week, and we will finish this beautiful story of Ruth. Ruth chapter 3, we're going to look at the whole chapter this morning. In November of 1937, the cartoonist Al Capp created a character, and the name of that character was Sadie Hawkins. And this comic strip called Little Abner, there was a mayor of a town called Dogpatch, USA, and the mayor of this town had a daughter named Sadie Hawkins. And unfortunately for Miss Sadie, she was so ugly that her dad was afraid that she would never get married. And so being the mayor and having some sway, what he did was he created something called Sadie Hawkins Day. And so he would line all the women up and he'd line all the men up, and he would have the men take off running. He would give them a 10-second head start, and then the ladies would run. And the rule was that if you could catch your man, that you could marry him. Well, apparently Sadie was as quick as she was ugly because she caught her man. Now we scoff at that and we laugh at that premise, and the reason we do is because of the hyperbole. But I think we also laugh at it because it challenges social customs, social norms. When I was growing up, it was unheard of for a woman to pursue a man. That's just not the way that it worked. The man was supposed to pursue the woman. If you wanted a girlfriend, what you would do is you'd work up the courage and you would risk rejection and you would ask them on a date. You would ask them out. In fact, if you're really wanting a girlfriend, we would say, man, he's chasing girls. He's really after girls. That's how I grew up. The man pursued the woman. Now, I know that may seem old school for some of the younger people in the room, but that's just how it was. But if that's how it was when I was growing up, how much more do you think that was the case in the ancient Near East? It was absolutely unheard of for a woman to propose to a man. It was unheard of for a young lady to propose to an older man. It was unheard of for a poor field worker to propose to the landowner. It was unheard of for a Gentile to propose to a Jew, and yet that's exactly what Ruth does in our story today in Ruth chapter 3. So the title of my message this morning is There is a Redeemer Nearer Than I. There is a Redeemer nearer than I. What I want you to do is I want you to look at chapter 3, and we're going to look at verses 1 through 5, and you're going to see what I call the plan. The Bible says, Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative whose young women, whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak. Go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he is finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. And she replied, All that you say, I will do. So Naomi and Ruth, they hatch this plan, and the plan is to get Boaz's attention. And the purpose of the plan, if you look at the passage here, is for Ruth to, quote, find rest. Naomi is trying to secure a future for Ruth. She wants her to have stability. She wants her to have security. She wants her to get married, to find a husband, to have children, and to begin a legacy. Remember, in that day, if you were a widow, your options were pretty slim. You could choose slavery, you could choose destitute poverty, or you could choose prostitution. And so it really wasn't a good culture for widows. And so she wanted to secure a future for her. She wanted her to be safe and secure. And she knows that Boaz is a candidate to be a redeemer for her. And she also knows that Boaz is a good man, that he is a godly man, that he is going to take care of her. And so they hatched this plan in order to get his attention. Well, why are they trying to get his attention? Because there are times, and I think ladies will back me up here, there are times when guys are singularly focused on something. We have a one-track mind. We've got one thing on our mind. And there's times when ladies have to get our attention. I know personally for me right now, this stage of life, I'm laser focused on the church and being the best pastor I can be, the best preacher I can be, going to school, trying to get as good as grades as I can. And I know that sounds like several different things, but all that falls under the bucket of the calling that God has placed on my life. And there's times where I get so consumed with the calling God's placed on my life that everything could be burning down around me and I don't even notice it. Like the world could be going to hell in a handbasket and it's like I don't even know what's going on. So there's times where Taylor has to say, sweetheart, could you call this person? Could you do this? Or she'll say, hey, Hallie needs to go here. Harper needs to go here. We've got to do all this. And if she didn't do that, I probably would just be up here at the church doing something. And so it's a good thing, generally, to have women in our lives to help get our attention. So Naomi tells Ruth, take a bath, put some perfume on. Oil in that day was more fragrant, so they would have used it as their version of deodorant or perfume. Put on the best clothes that you have, lay at his feet, and get his attention. By the way, that's pretty good advice if you want to attract a mate. Bathe, put some deodorant on, put some smell good on. Make sure you have 2 eyebrows. Put on a shirt, if you're a dude, put on a shirt with buttons and a collar. Like, be presentable. Take off the pajama pants, put real pants on. That was the plan. She was going to get gussied up. She was going to go get Boaz's attention. And it's not just about being attractive. It was also about signaling to everybody that she is back on the market, that she is a free agent, that she's no longer in mourning over her husband who passed away. She was ready to return back to normal life. Now, before we go further, there's another thread that I want to pull that I believe is very important. And that is that Ruth and Naomi are also putting their faith into action. Yes, they love the Lord. They put their faith in him. And one of the main themes of the book is God's providence, as we've said before. He's moving history towards his desired end. God is in control. However, they did not use this as a cover for laziness. They didn't let this slide into fatalism. Well, God's in control, so I'm just going to let it be what it's going to be. And God's just going to have a husband knock on my door and just say, hey, will you marry me? I don't know you, but that's just not how it's going to work. God's providence is not a license for laziness. There is a time to wait on the Lord. There is a time to wait for God to do what he's going to do, but there's also a time for us to act. There's a time for us to put our faith into action. And God often uses our actions and uses our work to accomplish his plan. So that's the plan. Now look at verses 6 through 9 if you would, and you're going to see the proposal. Verse 6. So she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight, the man was startled, no joke, and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. He said, "Who are you?" They didn't have nightlights back then, so it was pretty dark. And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." So Ruth goes to the threshing floor, and she does exactly what Naomi had said. Now, really quickly, explanation about the threshing floor, because I doubt that many of you have one of those in your home. We actually have a picture of a threshing floor, and it was an elevated spot on somebody's land, and they would take a winnowing fork. I'm going to talk about the winnowing fork here in a minute. And what they would do is they would take the wheat, and they would use the winnowing fork, and they would throw the wheat in the air, and the wind would separate the wheat from the tares. It would separate the wheat from the chaff. The actual fruit, the actual grain was heavier, so it would fall to the threshing floor, and the chaff would blow away. They would gather the chaff up with the stalks. If you notice on the back of that picture, that's the stalks and the chaff that they've piled up. They're going to use that to have a fire and keep them warm at night. And so we also have a picture of the winnowing fork, if you can put that up. Yep, that's what that looks like. So they take that winnowing fork, almost like a pitchfork or a leaf rake, and they would use that to scoop it up and to throw it up in the air. They would do this in the late afternoon or the evening because typically you could get a steady wind going in one direction, and so it would make it easier for you to do that. The servants would sleep by the fire, and the owner would often sleep by the grain to protect it from people stealing it or from animals eating it. So Ruth goes to the threshing floor, and she waits until he falls asleep, and then she goes and lays down at his feet, and she uncovers his feet. Now, I need to pause here because there are a lot of commentators say a lot of different things on this passage. There are several commentators who take the stance that these verses are charged with sexual innuendo. They say that sometimes uncovering someone's feet is a euphemism for uncovering someone's nakedness. I don't think that's what's going on. Here's why I don't think that. Number one, this is God's story. This is the story of God's hand of providence at work, and there's nothing in the story that would indicate that there's anything immoral going on, that there's anything sinful going on. Furthermore, the passage, the whole book of Ruth talks about Ruth and Boaz as noble people, worthy people, godly people. And so I don't think that's what's going on here. Here's what I think is going on. I think she uncovered his feet so that the cool breeze would wake him up. You ever been sleeping before and your foot gets out of the covers and you get cold and it wakes you up? I think that's what's going on, so that she could speak with him privately. Now, that being said, it's still a risky plan. He could have woken up on the wrong side of the bed. He could have woken up grouchy and like, what are you doing? He could have misinterpreted the signs. He could have thought that she was trying to do something immoral. And then also there's always the threat that something dangerous could happen with her being alone with him in private. But what I want you to do, think about that situation. Try to put yourself in that situation. She took the risk because she saw Boaz's character in chapter 2 and she trusted him. Now, this is a strange situation, and it's a situation, frankly, that makes me uncomfortable. As a Christian man who works hard to protect his integrity and his purity, this scene would make me very uncomfortable. If I'm sleeping at night and I wake up and there's an attractive woman laying there at my feet, that just makes me extremely uncomfortable. This is not how I would counsel any young lady to behave. That's not how I'm going to teach my daughters to behave. But all that aside, this is the truth of what happens. But let me just have you think about this, just by way of application. How do you react when people interrupt you? How do you react when people interrupt you? How do you act when somebody comes to you with bad timing? Oh, you just couldn't pick a worse time to do this. Because the whole time I'm reading this, I'm thinking, isn't there a better time to have this conversation? Isn't there a better time for you to come to me with this proposal? Isn't there a better way to do this? But how you respond in moments like this reveals your character. This is not a situation that you plan for. This is not a situation that I've personally rehearsed before. Ruth is essentially proposing marriage to Boaz. Here's what she says. She says, spread your wings over your servant. So in that day, and we have a picture of this, when a man went to marry a woman, he would take a linen or a silk shawl and he would cover her head and shoulders with it. He would wrap it around her head and shoulders. Now, I think modern Jewish weddings, they now use like a small tent or like an arch that people get married under. But this idea goes all the way back to the Exodus, when God's people lived in tents and they were exposed, and yet God took care of them. God protected them. God provided for them. It's also a reference to the wings of the tabernacle. It's said that God's presence would hover over the tabernacle. And so it's a reference to, whenever you would do that to your bride, it's a reference that God's presence is over your marriage, that God is going to bless your marriage, that he's going to protect you from the enemy, that he's going to provide for the household. In the New Testament, Jesus says, I would have gathered you like a hen gathers her chicks, which would be under the wings. It's a picture of God's provision. It's a picture of God's protection, of God's care for you. So what she's saying is, will you be my redeemer? Will you be my protector? Will you take care of me? Will you provide for me? Now let me go just a step further. It's also a picture of the church. The church is the bride of Christ. Jesus is the bridegroom. And when we come to Christ, what we're saying is, will you redeem me? Jesus, will you protect me? Will you provide for me? Will you take care of me? That's what it means. It's a beautiful phrase. That's what it means to spread your wings over your servant. Now look at verse 10 through 14 if you would, and you're going to see the promise. It says, and he said, may you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, and that you have not gone after young men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask. For all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. And now it is true that I am a redeemer, and then here's the title of our message, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight and in the morning. If he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he's not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning. So she lay at his feet until the morning, but arose before one could recognize another. And he said, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. Now I want you to notice how Boaz responds, because I told you, how you respond to a situation like this, it reveals your character. What does Boaz do? He pronounces a blessing on her. He says, the Lord bless you. He says, may you be blessed by God. You have shown me kindness, which is the Hebrew word hesed. And I don't have time to fully dig into that, but that term hesed cannot be defined by like a single Hebrew or single English word. It is covenant love. It's God's steadfast love. It is his faithfulness. It is his kindness. It is his mercy. It's a love or kindness that goes beyond the requirement of duty. It is all of God's positive attributes, if you want to say it that way, rolled into that one Hebrew word, hesed. And that's what he says, you've shown me kindness. He's also, the more that I look at this, the more that I think that Ruth was probably an attractive woman, because he says there in verse 10, he says, you've not gone after young men, poor or rich. Essentially what he's saying is you could have had your pick. You could have had a young man, you could have had an old man, you could have had a poor man, you could have had a rich man. You could have had your pick of guys, but you are reasonable. You're sensible. You're looking beyond the physical attributes, and you're going after a man of character, a good man, a godly man. Ruth is an embodiment of the Proverbs 31 woman. In fact, some of your older Hebrew Bibles, when they arrange the books of the Bible, they put Ruth directly after Proverbs. So you have Proverbs 31:10, and it says a virtuous woman who can find. And then what they're doing is they're trying to show you an illustration. This is a picture of what a Proverbs 31, this is a picture of what that would look like. So he blesses her, and then he makes her a promise. He says, I'm going to do what you asked me to do. He says that he's a redeemer, but there's a redeemer that's near, there's a closer relative that could redeem her. And so he says, if he's willing to redeem you and marry you, then you're going to have your wish. But if not, I'll redeem you. I'm willing to redeem you and take care of you. In essence, here's what he's saying. He's saying, if this is meant to be, then let's trust the Lord. Let's wait on him. God is trustworthy. You can trust God even with things that you really desire. Even with things that you really, really want, you can trust the Lord and trust that he's going to come through. And then it says that she stayed at his feet until morning, which I think lets us know that there was no shenanigans going on. And then look at verses 15 through 18, if you would. We'll finish the chapter up here. We see in verses 15 through 18 the provision, how Boaz provides for Ruth. He said, bring the garment you're wearing and hold it out. So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley, which is between 60 and 100 pounds, by the way, and put it on her. Then she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, how did you fare, my daughter? And then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, these 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said to me, you must not go back. Now I want you to think about this phrase or underline it. Empty-handed to your mother-in-law. She replied, "Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today." So he provides a great deal of barley for her again. Previously, he gave her about 30 pounds of barley, and now he's given her, like I said, 60 to 100 pounds, probably as much as she could possibly carry back home. Notice in verse 15, it says that he put the barley on her. So he probably put it on her back or on her head so that she could carry it back home. He gives her this extravagant gift, and he provides not only for her, but he also provides for Naomi. And I want you to look at verse 16. In verse 16, Naomi says, in the English it says, "How did you fare?" But in the Hebrew it says, "Who are you?" Here's what she's saying essentially. She's saying, did it work? Are you married? Are you engaged? How did it go? That's what she's saying. Whenever she says, "Who are you?" that's what she's saying. Are you still Ruth, or are you what's your last name? Are you married? So she tells the story, and I want you to notice an important detail there in verse 17. The author uses the phrase empty-handed. Now this takes us back to chapter 1. If you remember in chapter 1 what Naomi said, "I went away full, but the Lord brought me back empty." I went away full, but the Lord brought me back empty. But Boaz said, "I want to make sure that you and Naomi are not empty. You're not empty-handed. God is going to provide for you. And by the way, I'm going to provide for you." But I want you to notice that Naomi's story is the exact opposite, the mirror opposite of Ruth's story. Naomi left full and came back empty because she did not trust the Lord. But Ruth left the house empty and she came back full because she did trust the Lord. Let me just share this with you before we move on. If you will be obedient to the Lord, he will provide for you. If you will trust the Lord and you'll be obedient, he's going to provide for you. He's going to sustain you. He's going to satisfy you, and he will keep you. Here's the big idea. Here's the main point of the passage. There is a greater Redeemer. Now, I want you to listen to me, church. There are things that your family can do to help you. There are things that your employer can do to help you. There are things that your church family can do to help you. But at the end of the day, there are things that only God can do for you. Only he can redeem you. Only he can provide for you in that way. He is the one who protects you. He is the one who cares for you. And he is the one that you need. Now again, Boaz is what's called a type of Christ. It says there at the end, it says, Boaz won't rest until the matter is settled today. Boaz was willing to pay any price to redeem the woman that he loved. He was willing to pay any price. Whatever the price was, he was willing to pay it to make sure that he redeemed the woman that he loved. There was a day where our redemption was settled. There was a cross called on a place called Calvary, and on that cross, Jesus redeemed us. That means he bought us back. He purchased us back. We were sold into the slavery of sin and death and spiritual darkness, and with his very life, he bought us back. With his very life, he purchased us from the darkness. He was willing to pay the price, whatever it cost. He was willing to pay the price with his life because of his great love for us. And he would not rest on the cross until all the work was finished. Notice what he says there. The man will not rest, but he will settle the matter today. That's what Jesus did on the cross. He would not rest until the matter was settled. The matter of our redemption was settled. And on the cross, he yelled out, "Tetelestai," which means it's finished. He had completed all of the work that the Father had sent him to do. Well, our story here in chapter 3, it ends on a cliffhanger. If you haven't read chapter 4, you're left wondering, so what's going to happen? Is Boaz going to redeem Ruth? Is it going to be this closer kinsman? Is it going to be this closer relative? What's going to happen? But with us today, there is no cliffhanger. You might be saying, well, Pastor Brooks, I'm struggling and I'm suffering, and I just want to know who can save me. I want to know who can redeem me, who can help me, who can take care of me, who can provide for me. Here's the good news. You don't have to be left on a cliffhanger. You don't have to wonder. The truth is that Jesus is our Redeemer. Listen to this from Galatians chapter 4. In the fullness of time, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, listen to this, to redeem those who were under the law, that we might receive the adoption as sons. Here's the good news. You can be redeemed today. You can be saved today. You can be provided for today. You can be protected today. You can be cared for and helped today. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to bow your heads and close your eyes, and we're going to transition to a time of invitation.